Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy 16 because a ragebait article recently came out from the folks over at Kotaku, go figure, right? And they were basically complaining that the game is too white, okay? The players in the trailer are just simply too white. There's not enough diversity, there's not enough minorities and whatnot in the game. You know how it's gotten, like to the point where in gaming, like this has become a massive issue. I remember like 10 years ago, nobody really cared about the color of pixels on the video game skin, but now we've gotten to a point where this is like a big deal and everybody's like really worried about what color people are in video games and stuff like that. You got to have diversity and whatnot in your game or else you're a racist and whatnot, right? And honestly, this article is pretty horrible, and I'm gonna kind of deconstruct it in this video a little bit, and I'm gonna provide the full context that makes this sound way different. But I just find it funny when Kotaku comes out with articles like this and they post stuff like this, because these outlets wonder like, man, why are we dying? Why is legacy media dying? And why do people go to YouTube content and people's like personal opinions for like coverage on situations like this instead of coming to our platform? And then they write like the worst possible article about the situation. They completely omit context to intentionally make things seem worse. Like, it's a pretty ridiculous trend, but I mean, I honestly don't expect anything less from Kotaku at this point. This is just kind of what they do now. And it's unfortunate because it's one of the things that have made me stop casually reading Kotaku. Like, if I'm not reading a Kotaku article for like a video or something, I'm simply never reading their platform. And it's because of shit like this divisive kind of content that does nothing to actually bring up a legitimate issue with a video game and more or less only serves to upset people. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a new trailer released for Final Fantasy 16, right? And there was no real issue. I mean, like, I saw it, and yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Final Fantasy guy, right? So I don't know if this is going to be a good game or if this is like a bad trailer or what the whole thing is with that. But apparently the issue that everyone is taking from it is that the characters in it, there's too many of them that are white, right? It's just a big deal, you know? 2 weeks ago, Square Enix released a new story trailer for its upcoming RPG, Final Fantasy XVI. There's just one noticeable problem. There doesn't seem to be a single non-white character in it. So IGN asked producer Naoki Yoshida about whether or not the game would feature any black people or any other people of color. Unfortunately, his response made me go, yikes, in real life. Yoshida explained that the fantasy world of Valisthea was based on medieval Europe, and they wanted to limit the world culturally and geographically. Valisthea was never going to be realistically be as diverse as, say, a modern-day Earth or even a Final Fantasy XIV, he said, as he was being asked to incorporate every race on the entire planet. Ultimately, we felt that while incorporating ethnic diversity into Valisthea was important, an over-incorporation into this single corner of a much larger world could end up causing a violation of those narrative boundaries we originally set for ourselves. So this answer honestly makes sense when you don't spin it and like leave a bunch of context out. I'll go into that here in a minute, but basically what he's saying is they based the world of the game off of medieval Europe. As most people know, the vast majority of people in medieval Europe were white. Of course, there were some minorities. It's not like it was a complete like whites only kind of party or something crazy going on, right? But when you look at like the numbers, there wasn't a whole lot of minorities in medieval Europe. It was mostly white. It was mostly homogenous. These cultures were pretty much linked together by their whiteness if you really look at it, right? And so they made a world that was based off of that. And apparently that's the end of the fucking world. Like, the whole planet has to halt still and we all have to turn our attention to this because, by the way, the full game's not even out. They're getting mad over a fucking trailer. If the game came out and this was still an issue, that's a little different. Even then, it's not a big deal to me, but like, I can understand that. This is simply a fucking graphic trailer, you know what I mean? It's a short little animated sequence to show off the game, right? That's what we're looking at here. It's like 0.2% of the total game, and yet this was article worthy, you know what I mean? This was worth getting people worked the fuck up over and like getting mad about. It's something like, once again, 0.2% of the game. So not only is this like an extreme minority of the game that's even been shown in the first place, but they did all this to like match the world of the game that they built, right? Like they didn't want to just put a bunch of people in that weren't really supposed to be there based on the world building that they were doing, right? And it's not to say there's no minorities in the game at all. Like, we don't even really know. When the full game comes out, we'll get a better idea of how much diversity is in the game. But this is like what people are mad about right now. And I just am confused. Like, why? This is such a first world problem, man. Like, if this is the worst thing that happens to you on a daily basis is there's too many white people in Final Fantasy 16, you probably have one of the easiest lives bugs ever that I can imagine, right? Like, if that's the number one problem in your daily life is what color the fucking pixels are on a screen, personally, to me, that sounds like a pretty easy and carefree life, dude. Like, how is this newsworthy in literally any way? Which begs the question, why did they enforce a whites-only boundary in the first place? After acknowledging that the real world is more diverse than Valisthea, he continued, quote, "The story we're telling is fantasy, yes, but it's also rooted in reality. Which is it, Yoshida? You can't say your fictional world isn't bound to reality, then use reality to explain why black people can't exist in Valisthea. Pick a struggle and stick with it, please. What's really frustrating about all this is that black and brown people have always existed in medieval Europe. If the creative leadership had done more research or checked their biases, then they might have noticed that black people have been living in Britain for 2,000 years. Or that some black Europeans were canonized in the Holy Roman Empire, or realized that Iberia was under Islamic rule for approximately 500 years. Instead of a realistic imagining of medieval Europe, we get Final Fantasy XVI instead." I emailed Square Enix to ask how it decided on whether or not a story element violated the developers' narrative boundaries, and I'll let you know once I've gotten a response. Yeah, good job writing them trying to fucking tattletale because you didn't like. That's really cool. But it's really weird how they're trying to like make this a black and white issue, you know what I mean? Like, not literally in terms of race, but like they're trying to take all of the context out of this story. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna give you the full quote of what this guy said. Because, shocker, it's not actually in the article. It's only a little small piece of the actual like quote that he gave. That got even reported on in the first place because, you know, actually adding context to your story and telling what someone said in full might make your story seem a lot less important when you're trying to write a fucking rage article. So someone in the comments ended up putting this, and this is the full quote. "Our design concept from the earliest stages of development has always heavily featured medieval Europe, incorporating historical, cultural, political, and anthropological standards that were prevalent at the time when deciding on a setting that was best suited to the story we wanted to tell. The story of land beset by the Blight, we felt that rather creating something on a global scale, it was necessary to limit the scope to a single landmass, one geographically and culturally isolated from the rest of the world in an age without airplanes, television, or telephones. Due to the underlying geographical, technological, and geopolitical constraints of the setting, Valisthea was never going to realistically be as diverse as, say, modern-day Earth or even Final Fantasy XIV that has an entire planet and moon worth of nations, races, and cultures at its disposal. The isolated nature of this realm, however, does end up playing a large part in the story and is one of the reasons Valisthea's fate is tied to the rest of the world." So I feel like that full quote gives way more context and like really kind of makes what the developers are saying make a lot more sense. But of course, a large portion of that got cut out, you know, during the editorial process, I'm sure. You know, the editor probably made some minor adjustments on that one, you know, just conveniently cutting out the context that explains why they went with this decision. And it's kind of funny because the article like postures like, oh, well, why did they do this? Curious. Even though like they literally tell you why they did it in the first place and they give you the answer up front, like, yeah, this is why we made this decision, this is why we're doing it. And it's honestly a pretty reasonable decision and a pretty reasonable and understandable thing. Like, yeah, that's what they were going for. Of course, this got turned into a big rage article and people are mad about it. So let me know down in the comments what you think. Are you mad because Final Fantasy's too white in one trailer that was released before the game ever came out? Or do you have a fucking brain in your head and you don't really worry about fucking video game racism, not enough fucking minorities and whatnot in medieval Europe video game? You know, I don't know, bro. It's fucking stupid to me personally. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @subtheoptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, talking about how Final Fantasy's too white and signing out.